Hello, hello. Welcome back to the A for Business podcast. It's me, Courtney Shaw, and you are listening to episode 26. We're going to be talking about money mindset. This topic is one of my favorites. And I'm going to admit, we're going to have an open conversation, really, me having a conversation with you, kind of with myself. It's going to be less of a structured episode and more of me presenting some ideas for you to consider, some questions for you to ponder, some concepts for you to reflect on, some pieces of the journey I've been on in working on the way I think about money in the 10 years that I've been in business. I want to say, and I always say this when it's something that's not my domain, and I just think it's important because sometimes I can come off as really confident talking about topics that are not my expertise. Money mindset is something I love, just like I love researching and talking about ADHD and things like that, but I'm not an expert. I'm a student just like you. And so I'm here to stand side by side with you, to sit next to you in this conversation, not to be preaching from a pedestal or anything like that. I want you to know that I'm sharing what I'm sharing with you today as a peer, as a colleague, as a friend, not as a shiny expert on the subject. And I think that's more helpful anyway. So I'm going to approach this by kind of like, it might feel a little bit, the word staccato is coming to mind, but a little bit like fragmented, like I'm coming at this from a few different angles, but I want to make sure that, I don't have a philosophy on like the 5 steps to improve your money mindset or anything like that. And I'm not going to like spend my time making one up. And that's not really the core of what I teach. I just want to talk to you guys about a few of the main principles, a few of the main pillars in the concept of, your money mindset that I think are really important. And stay tuned to the end because I'm going to give you some resources. There's 4 main people or resources that I really recommend that you follow to learn more from people who are mastering this topic. And if you have any resources, I'm sure I'm forgetting some folks. There's so many great experts out there. Then, go ahead and send me a DM on Instagram at Courtney Shaw and let me know. Okay, so I think when it comes to your money mindset, let's talk about what is that. And I think the term mindset gets thrown around a lot. It's really just the collection of automatic thoughts you have about the subject of money. And we really need to address the fact that most of it is, keyword, automatic or unconscious. Most of our thoughts and behaviors come from our unconscious brain. Another topic that I'm not an expert at, brain science, that I absolutely love. And we often don't acknowledge as human beings just how much of our behavior, our habits, our patterns, our choices, our preferences come from things we learned before the age of 6, right? So much research is showing now that we really absorb the majority of who we are by age 5. We're really spending that time getting to know the world. And so there's so much to unlearn when you grow up in a society, as we all have, where there's very unhealthy, inaccurate, taboo, toxic even conversations around money. That's the norm. The norm when we talk about money are things like money doesn't grow on trees, earning dollars per hour, things like that. Things that is the water we've all been swimming in for so long that we've never questioned. I'm going to talk about 2 core pieces of, what makes up your money mindset here. One being, you have a unique money story that comes from your unique experiences and, maybe your relationship with money as a child, how your parents or caretakers, whoever was around you, talked about money when you were growing up or didn't talk about money. That was often the case for me. And I'll tell you a little bit about my money story just to give you an example and tell you how this affects me. But I also think the second pillar is there's some societal money stories that so many of us have. So many people have this focus on obsessing over not getting in debt and obsessing over what I have versus the ROI I would get. What I mean specifically about that is when people in general, and I've seen this over the 10 years that I've been working as a business owner and doing sales in various capacities, when people think about enrolling in a program or hiring a coach or a service provider, they often go into this real lack mentality about like, this is how much money I have. Like, I only have X number of dollars, or, oh my God, this is how much my rent is. And I'm comparing this investment to my rent. And because of my personal life, rent is the most expensive thing I have. And in this business, now this investment is going to be more than my rent. That must not be right, right? Like, we make these weird analogies that are only based on what we've learned from other people, our experiences. So I always encourage business owners, including you listening, that yes, of course, don't make ridiculous financial decisions. Like, of course, look at your budget. Of course, look at what you have. But when it comes to deciding, should I enroll in a coaching program that's going to up level my business to a place that is like almost impossible for me to even fathom right now, right? Like, I'm ready to do the work, but this is like really scary. It's probably going to be the biggest investment you've made to that point, right? It's probably going to cost more in total than you have in your bank account right now. And so I think a lot of times people focus too much on, this is what I have, and not, this is what I'm missing out on. This is the opportunity cost if I don't do something. And I see people get stuck in this cycle where they're constantly like, I need to make do with what I have. And then what that creates is just more of needing to make do with what you have, because you haven't done anything to really put skin in the game to leverage the energy that comes behind making an investment. They say people who pay show up, right? That is like a whole concept I don't think we talk about. We don't teach kids. We don't learn about in school. Okay. So anyway, let's go back to your unique money story, because I think this is one that probably gets talked about the most. And this is going to go back to, I want you to consider, as a child, what were your experiences with money? They often ask you, I remember I would go to all these seminars and read all these books, and I've done so many things around the money mindset. They always ask you what your earliest money memory is. And I struggled with this so much. And what I realized is money was so not talked about around me from my experience, from what I recall. The adults that were around me may remember differently. But for me, it was so not talked about that I barely even have a memory of it. Like, it was like basically not a concept to me. Even today, as a 33-year-old woman, I realize sort of, you learn new things about yourself and then you kind of process old memories with this new information, that I always wanted a big life. Like, I always wanted a beautiful home and like, beautiful decor and, all these things. But I never attached the whole money thing to that. I never was like, oh, I'm going to need money to do that. And then in order to get the money, I'm going to have to do X, Y, or Z. It was just more like, it'll just happen. Like, I'll just have it. Like, for some reason, that connection in some ways was missing for me. So that's something I've been exploring, right? But money wasn't really talked about for me. And I remember one of my earliest money memories that I have is, and I don't know how old I was, but I went to my mom because I really wanted an allowance. And I asked her, if I could have an allowance, because I wanted to spend my own money. My friends had allowances. I wanted to save. I was like feeling really industrious. And my mom said to me, she said something like, you'll get more stuff if I buy it for you. And, her and I have talked about this since that this came up for me, because I really needed to hash this out and figure out why this was bothering me. And, she told me, she's like, well, at the time I didn't have money to give you an allowance. I didn't want to tell you that. So I just told you this other thing. And, that's a decision she made in the moment. What happened for me, however, is that was a moment that then, created a sort of fork in the road for me, where I started to have this story that I can't be trusted with money, that I'm not good with money, that it's better that other people take care of my money, that I don't need to worry about money. And not even in a negative way, just kind of like, you don't need to worry about money. Like, that's just something you as a person don't need to worry about. So guess what? I didn't worry about it. And that created some good things, some like feelings of abundance and lack of concern, but also obviously some negative consequences. I think everything's a double-edged sword of feeling very stressed around when I do have to manage money, that I'm not capable of it and I'm not trusted with it and somebody else needs to do it for me. But then also not trusting other people to do it, because you hear all these like horror stories about money managers like screwing people over and things like that. So sort of being stuck between a rock and a hard place, trying to figure it out, but then totally like creating chaos for myself. And all of that just playing into the story, right? Those stories we have, they become self-fulfilling prophecies that just prove themselves to be true, even though they're not. Let's break this down a little bit. I had a story that I'm not good at handling money. Other people need to do it for me. Okay. And so what would happen is, even though I've read probably more than 50 books about personal and business finance, I've been to seminars, I've learned Warren Buffett's investing strategies. Like when I tell you I've learned a lot about money, I've had to learn how to do taxes, not only in the US as a sole proprietor, also not only in Canada as a sole proprietor, but in Canada as a sole proprietor in Quebec that has its own tax system, and then as a sole proprietor in BC that has its own tax system, and now with a corporation in BC as a US citizen with a foreign corporation, which means I have to do 3 different tax filings every single year. So I've had to learn a lot, more than the average business owner. Most of you out there do not have to file taxes in 2 different countries. Most of you don't have corporations. I have a very complicated tax situation. And what my point is, I have a lot of knowledge around money and finances, but my story is that I'm not good at it. So no matter how much knowledge I have, no matter what the data says, no matter what the fact is, my story, my drama, my fiction is that, well, it's a belief that I'm not good at money. So if you have a belief like that, it doesn't matter what strategy you have. It doesn't matter what budget sheet you use. It doesn't matter how much you charge for your program or whatever, and this is what we do in Yay for 100K is so important to me, because I'm like, yeah, I'll give you every strategy and every step, but the real work happens when your beliefs get in the way and you can't figure out why you're not implementing it or why you're having a hard time or why these patterns keep coming up. Like that's where the real work happens, because that's where we get to uncover these beliefs that are literally invincible to the data, the facts, the learning, the strategy. They will win. So even though I knew a lot and I would go and I would do I had this like really robust budget for our business and I would manage that. What happened is, let's say I make a mistake, right? Like everyone makes mistakes in everything, but you make a mistake in something that you're already feeling like an imposter around or that you're not good at, and you take it personally. It's very different from if you make a mistake doing something where you have a very healthy growth mindset around, right? Like if I make a mistake copywriting or marketing or selling, I'm like, oh, oops, I messed up. Whatever, let's move on. Like it literally doesn't even affect me. But if I make a mistake doing something that I already am sensitive around, right? Like this is what a trigger is a disproportionate response to a stimulus, is I feel triggered by making a mistake. So I'm trying to think of an example. So let's say I underestimate team expenses for the month. I'm like, oh man, I underestimated by like $2,000 how much it was going to cost us to run our team this month. Well, if someone was feeling really confident or they had a healthy money story that was like, I can figure anything out when it comes to money, they'd go, oh, okay, what do we need to do to heal this? Like, what's the thing that we need to do to just like regulate this problem and make sure it doesn't happen again. But when I would make a mistake like that, it would go, see, I can't be trusted with money, close the browser, turn on Netflix, run away, don't look at the budget ever again, because I have an association, and I'm going to speak past tense because that'll be healthier. I had an association that looking at the budget, looking at the finances causes pain, right? And literally in my brain, it was like, you're going to die now. Like, you're going to die because you can't handle this. And then like something terrible is going to happen because of that. And you're going to die. Okay. So if that's the association, me opening the budget equals I'm going to die. How often do you think I'm going to open my budget? Not very often. So if you find yourself being an avoider around money, or, people often say like putting your head in the sand, like being the ostrich, putting your head in the sand, it's not because you're stupid. It's not because you can't handle it. It's because your inner child has a story that you've been carrying around for a very long time that is perpetuating a pattern that now you're seeing as more and more evidence that that story is true, but really the story is creating the evidence. The story is making itself true. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So that was a bit of a long sort of explanation, but I really think it's helpful to have examples when you're learning a new concept. And I know that while you might not relate 100% to my story, hopefully me giving you some examples of how my money story plays out, it might help you to illuminate how maybe your money story has played out. And, I just want to tell a funny little anecdote here. Going back to just this concept of me not realizing what money is and that it's something that, you have to like work for or like acquire in some way. When I was a kid, my mom, we went to the grocery store and I asked her if I could have something of candy. I don't remember what it was. And I don't even remember this. She's the one that tells me this story. And I said, can I have this? She goes, no, we don't have enough for that. And I said, it's okay, mommy. Just write a check. So I just had this idea that like, you just write a check and then you have the money. It's very like David Rose from Schitt's Creek. It's just a write-off. You just write it off, right? Like I just had no understanding of like where it came from and what it was for and like that there was a limited amount in someone's bank account and that you couldn't just like invent it. So I was just inventing money. So anyway, that's how, my 6-year-old self has been showing up in my money management. And some things for you to explore there with your personal story are things like, like I mentioned, what your parents talked about, how you as a child might have felt about money, if there's any situation specifically where you can remember. I remember once asking my stepdad how much money he made because we were doing a project in school where we were learning about like paying rent and salaries. And I realized I had no understanding of any of that. And I felt very behind the people in my class. I felt like they all had this understanding. And I was like, I don't get it. Nobody's explained this to me. And he got really uncomfortable. And so I took in this message of, oh, I'm not supposed to do that. I shouldn't have asked him about that. So, and I was just, it wasn't even like, how much do you make? I want to judge you. It was like, I'm feeling insecure because I don't understand what a salary is. Is it $100? Is it $1 million? Like I had no realm of understanding how much money a person made. And this was like when I was in 8th grade, right? So at a point where like, it was becoming important for me to have this information. Okay, so let's talk about then, the other one I wanted to mention is the amount of money you see other people earning around you. This is really important for your personal money story because some of us grew up in situations where the people around us were not earning any money. Like there was like even poverty. Maybe you grew up in a really challenging economic situation, and that is definitely affecting you. But it doesn't matter what situation you had, it's affecting you. You could have grown up in a very affluent situation. You're going to be equally as affected by that. And also, by the way, one person or two people could grow up in the same technical economic situation, like in the same family, and have very different interpretations of their money story could be totally different. Somebody could be very motivated to make a lot of money because they grew up without, and someone else might be convinced that it's not possible for them. And so they don't. So it's not about it's not about the data, it's about the drama. The data isn't going to convince someone about their money. You have to explore the beliefs, the belief structures in our brains, because in our brains, a belief is a fact. So if you believe money is limited on planet Earth, you believe that to be a fact. And the fact is it's not. Money is not limited. I'm going to give you guys a great resource to really tackle that belief, especially if you're someone who loves information and science and data and you don't want just like airy-fairy, like everything's abundant kind of information, which I really needed. I need like the scientific method to show me something. Money as a factual thing is limitless. There's more created literally every millisecond of the day. Okay. But I've had people fight me on this. They're like, well, my economics teacher in 10th grade told me it wasn't. I'm like, well, your economics teacher in 10th grade was wrong. Right. But let's explore that, because would you prefer to hold on tight to this belief of your economics teacher telling you when you were in 10th grade? Or would you rather learn that it's like, which one is more like appropriate? Do you want to know the fact or do you want to be right? And I would rather know the thing that's going to be the most helpful for me, which obviously is the fact. So this interesting little debate someone got in with me like a couple of years ago, I think. Okay. So, what you see other people earn, we had one really wealthy part of our family growing up. And so I always had an idea about like how much money they had. So it's like, you can have sort of these energetic limits on how much you're willing to make. Let's say your dad was a government employee and made like $60,000 a year. I'm just like throwing out a number. I don't mean that because these numbers can be triggering, right? So it could be 30,000, it could be 100,000, like whatever it is. It's like totally, what's the word I'm looking for? It just is all relative to your situation. The number doesn't matter. It's the story about the number, okay? Let's say that you're having a really hard time breaking through 60K in your business. It might be because energetically you have this thing about, well, my dad made $60,000 my whole life. I'm only, this age. How dare I make more than him? He worked so hard, right? A lot of people have that. They have a parent who worked really hard and sacrificed a lot, and they only made, X amount of money a year. And it's like, oh my God, how dare I do that? Or on the flip side, it could be, wow, my mom was super successful and had a 6-figure salary. And now and it took her a decade to get there. And I'm 25 and how dare I make more than that when it took my mom so long to get there? And we can create all these sort of see how these stories come up. So it's interesting to play with what amounts of money did you consider other people had, or you believed other people had? And what did you tell how have you organized your life to sort of maintain the status quo of the family, right? Of who has the most money, who's the rich person in the family. That's a very interesting one to examine. I really did hit a limit when it was passing what I knew that my mom had made in her career. That was a very big one for me, and because I know she worked so hard and I felt like I hadn't earned it. And so it was one that I was knocking my head up against for a very long time. Okay. Societal money stories. So these are ones that come from just messages we hear all the time, that these aren't your story. It's not because of your situation that you got this story. It's because society has this story, and the story is not true, but we all just pass it along to each other. And so we collectively to believe it to be a fact, like money is limited is a big one. It's very hard when everyone believes something to be true, even though it's not, because you can feel like you're really fighting an uphill battle. So money is limited or scarce. That's just not true. Money is a fake thing that was invented. And what we have to really wrap our minds around is it's not even attached to a physical thing. It's not attached to the gold standard. It's not even every dollar out there's a physical dollar bill to represent it. Money just gets created all the time. Interest going up is just money getting created in the system. There's just banks, and the book I'm going to recommend you guys at the end talks about this. Banks literally just money gets added in computers all the time. So this idea that that's not happening, or that will cause serious inflation is kind of a joke, because it's happening all the time and it doesn't. Inflation is an interesting concept, because inflation really only happens because we believe it's going to happen. And so because people don't really understand how money works, they think, oh, if that happened, we'd have high inflation. But it doesn't, because people don't realize that's happening. So inflation doesn't go up. Inflation is a belief. It's very hard to nail down inflation. So again, I am not an expert, but I listen to a lot of podcasts. I read a lot of books. I'm going to give you guys some resources later. So don't take my word for it. Do your own research, read your own stuff, make your own judgment. That's always my recommendation. Money doesn't grow on trees. No, but it grows in computers. Grows in banks, grows in investment accounts. So there's lots of ways to create passive, and passive is a loose term, but to create passive income in the sense of it's not dollars per hour. It's, there's lots of ways to leverage your money and make your money work for you. And those are things I don't think we get taught. And then, the dollars per hours one is huge, is this way we've all been conditioned. If you think about our entire society is built to brainwash us and go into school in the school system to learn to get a job and trade our time for money. This is the capitalist system. This is what was created. You might even be triggered by me suggesting that's it's a system and you've been brainwashed, but it is. It didn't always exist. It probably won't always exist. It's a system we happen to live in, but I think it's really important that we zoom out. We try to, get out of the water we're swimming in and see it for what it is. And then, yes, this is the environment that we are in. So we need to play the game. But we also need to understand that it is a game, and that it isn't laws of nature and physics, how money works. Money was invented by human beings. It wasn't part of the evolutionary process. It doesn't grow on trees in the sense that humans made it up. It's something we totally created. Another societal thing is just it being really taboo to talk about money. This is one I struggle with, because it was for me, I got a message of money being very taboo to talk about. I also for a long time had a lot of shame around money, and like I said, I can't handle it. So mistakes I made around money. So when you have shame around money, of course you don't want to talk about it, because that's how shame gets its energy, right? That's how it gets fed. I think the more that we can slowly chip away at I don't think everyone needs to go and announce their salaries to everyone. I don't know that that's something I would even want to work towards. I do think though that the more we can chip away at some taboos, so if there's There's little things that you feel uncomfortable talking about that you could say to someone, or just mention that you're struggling with budgeting or that you haven't paid your taxes for last year. Like just little ways that you can be vulnerable to trusted people, that can start to help you realize, oh, it's okay. And it can start to take some of the shame away. And I think the more that we do that, and again, these little acts of vulnerability with money, maybe it's talking to your partner about something you bought that you've been hiding from them, or that you like don't like the way that they're spending money in a certain way. Obviously, like you need to do that in a very careful way. But I think having more conversations about money is important. It does not require total open transparency about all your money to everybody, but I do think it's important. And also, like, if you don't have a bookkeeper for your business, get a bookkeeper. If you are not letting someone else come and help you with your finances because you're afraid of that them seeing your finances, that is a trap that is going to create absolute disaster for you in not very much time at all. So please, I'm actually in the process of hiring a financial advisor right now because I realized I've been taking on too much for myself with money. And part of that is like the pressure I put on myself to like, I need to be great at it and like manage all of it. And then I get in that nasty cycle. So the kind of subcategory I want to address here about societal money stories is the messaging that we receive, those of us who identify as women, receive some pretty strong messages about money, and not just receive some messages. It was not that long ago that women were completely treated unequally around money. My mom was just telling me she had a time, she owned our house. She was the only person on the mortgage, on the mortgage. And she went into the bank to talk about the mortgage, and they said they couldn't talk to her without her husband there, and her husband wasn't even on the mortgage. Like that was in the early 2000s. Like that was less than 20 years ago. So things like that are very fresh, and it's not just, oh, we've received these like messages in the air. It's like there have been a lot of huge challenges for women and still are around money. You don't see women in financial roles as much as you see men. As women, we have this message around like, we're not meant to be like, that's too complex, right? Like women tend to manage household money, which I find really interesting, but it's like on smaller scale. When you start to get to a bigger scale, it's like we've received this message that that's not for us. That's for the men to handle, which, let's see how well they're doing that, right? So I think it's important that we explore, right? Again, I'm not here to prescribe anything to you. I just want to give you some topics to explore around being good at money, deserving loans. Women business owners often don't take out business loans, don't use debt for their businesses. Men do. Male-run businesses tend to make more money. It's very rare that women-owned businesses pass the $1 million revenue mark. So these are things I think we need to explore. And I'm not saying everyone should want to be a millionaire. I do think it's something that most of us should probably want. And it's way easier, I think, than we're led to believe. But I do think that if you're like, I don't want that, I would encourage you to explore why. I'm not saying you should want it or you have to want it. You can want anything you want, okay? However, the things we want are coming from our conditioning in some ways. And so what I would hate is for that conditioning about your role and who you are. And I'm in a group with these very successful business owners in a coaching program. And just yesterday I saw a woman post, I'm not a numbers person. And I just want to ban all of us from saying that. Like, I don't care what kind of math trauma you have. We've got to start practicing not talking like that. Because the truth is you're just as much of a numbers person as anyone, but that story you have is just going to perpetuate problems instead of helping you. So we need to heal that story and change that story. Also, I think women just make fewer riskier financial moves. And making risky moves doesn't mean like gambling necessarily. That's not what I'm talking about, but making investments and, making moves, wheeling and dealing with your money. Women aren't taught that's something that we do. And so again, resources at the end, we're learning about this, but this is why it was so important for me as a woman to learn about finance, learn about investing, learn about, I wanted to feel empowered around money. And I had a really great moment several years ago. I was kind of educating my husband around this stuff because this is not his thing. And And we went to the bank, and it was in Montreal, and I was kind of doing some translating. Back at the time, my husband's English wasn't very good. And the banker said, wow, we were just dating at the time. He said, wow, your girlfriend, she knows her stuff. And that was one of the most validating things. Like, again, I still had the story, no, I'm not good at money. Like, I know my stuff, but I don't implement it. So it kind of like tweaked my story a little bit. Those stories, they are tough, but it did help for me to kind of crack away at, wow, someone who's in this industry just gave me kudos. And sometimes it can be really nice to be validated that way, whether or not that person is, sometimes people who work at banks actually don't know that much. But he was in that position, right, of power. And so receiving that from that person was really meaningful to me at the time. Okay, here's some other concepts I want to talk about in terms of our money mindsets. I want to talk about this idea of archetypes. And there's lots of different ways this could go, but really just 3 core archetypes. I don't think any of us fit perfectly into one of these, but I think it's sort of an interesting tool to explore. So, whether you're a saver, a spender, or an avoider, I tend to be more of a spender and an avoider. So that's something for me to acknowledge. And then what I'll do, and this is the next concept I wanted to bring up, is pendulum swinging. So I have a tendency, and this might just be me, but I have a feeling it's not. I have a tendency to be really extreme with myself. So if I go and I spend a lot, then I'll get way extreme about not letting myself spend anything. So it's very unsustainable. So it creates these pendulum swings, right? It's it's very unhealthy. It's like going on an extreme diet and then binging because it's unsustainable, right? It's like how a lot of us feel in COVID about, okay, we have these really extreme, sort of lockdowns, and it's great. We know why we're doing it, but it's unsustainable because we cannot do it forever. And then we sort of explode. We're oh my God, I gotta see people. So, that is sort of what I'm talking about with money. Is what I would do is really punish myself. Oh, I overspent. Now I gotta punish myself. I can't do anything. Well, that's not sustainable either. So it's just something for you to explore if that's something, a pattern that maybe you've had in the past, or maybe you're a saver. Maybe you're the opposite of me. Maybe you're actually afraid of spending. You're the kind of person where it's you're kind of hoarding money and there's never enough. So one thing I would encourage on that end, because that's extreme as well, right, is, money is a flow. So if you are just holding on to money and you're not investing in your business, you're not, looking at ROI, I'm going to do this coaching program, I'm going to do that, or, whatever it is, you're
blocking the flow of money. And so you're just going to get stopped up. That's not really what we want either. So, I'm on the opposite end of things, but I do know a lot of people who are more on that hoarding of money side. And also just remember, money exists so that we can, enjoy our lives. So we don't want to be enjoying our lives too much so we don't have money, but we also don't want to be saving all the time so much that we don't enjoy our lives. So just something to consider. The energetic income. I love this concept from Denise Duffield Thomas, and she's one of my favorite money mentors. I took her boot camp, her money boot camp years ago, probably 2014, and it's fantastic. And I would recommend it to anybody who wants to take this stuff seriously. Her content is amazing. I'll talk about it at the end here. This concept of the energetic income is the amount of money that you're comfortable with. And what you'll see with energetic income is a great example is lottery winners. Is they'll win a bunch of money, but their energetic income is whatever it was before they won that money. And so they will literally get rid of all the extra money by spending because they're used to having, $50K a year salary. So they put themselves back. It's just our comfort zones, right? It's what we're used to. So it's really important to acknowledge that because the opposite happens as well. You'll see those ultra rich people, they lose everything and then they build it all back. And I'm not saying it's just because they have an energetic income. It's also because a lot of privilege and corruption and things like that happen. But also it's not always because of corruption. I don't want to do that because I also have a point to make about not making money a moral situation, but that you have an energetic income and that what we want to do and what Denise had you do in the boot camp is look at, how much money you made this year, last year, the year before, the year before, the year before, however far you can go back and see how your energetic income has gone up over time or not. And if there's sort of a plateau you're hitting to sort of ask yourself, what is the energetic meaning for that income level? For me, I said this, excuse me, I have the hiccups now. There was an income level where I realized I was going to be passing an amount that
my mom had been making. And that for me, that felt like a no-no for some reason. It was very subconscious. I wasn't like consciously like, no, I can't do that. But I kept hitting my head against it. And so that was really helpful. I needed to address that energetic income. What can you do to increase your energetic income? I love Denise's concept of incremental upgrades. So looking at your whole life and asking yourself, where are some easy ways that I could really upgrade? So is it getting a nicer pillows on my bed? Is it getting a better toothbrush? Is it like, how can I, and it's different for everybody, right? Some people love being frugal, and actually saving money is an energetic income upgrade for someone like me. For me, not spending can often feel like I'm upgrading because I'm taking care of my money. Sometimes though, if I'm pendulum swinging, it's like, no, you need to allow yourself to have that thing. There was a while of back in the day where I just really wouldn't let myself go to coffee shops. And then I was like, that's my upgrade. Is that such a small indulgence that makes me feel wealthier? So I'm going to upgrade into that. So that's a really fun exercise. And Denise, this is a whole exercise in her money boot camp. If you join that, I'm sure it's been upgraded, no pun intended, since I did it. So here's some things I want to remind you of. Money is limitless. Money is important. It does need to be taken care of. It's not something to just be left alone and stranded and ignored. It's money is neutral. Money doesn't have an opinion. Money is not morally superior or inferior. People who have money are not morally superior or inferior. Just because someone has a lot of money doesn't mean they're a bad person. Doesn't mean that they have bad morals. And we really need to examine our judgments on that. Because someone doesn't have money doesn't make them lazy. It doesn't make them better. It doesn't make anything. Money is not blessing people based on their morals. It has nothing to do with it at all. You've got people with a lot of money and great morals, people with a lot of money and shit morals. We all know that. Okay. I love the expression that money just amplifies who you are. So whoever you already are, it's just going to make you more of that. So, hey, if you want to see who you really are, what a great tool to do that. And then that will show you what you kind of need to adjust. But don't be afraid to do it, because you're holding yourself back and all these people you could be helping by not making that money. We project our money stories on our clients. And this is a big thing that came up in my program, Yay for 100K, last week on our coaching call, is this feeling of like, people aren't going to be able to afford that. And I feel bad charging a good rate because people won't be able to afford it. Yeah, some people aren't going to be able to afford it. And that's not up to you to make everyone able to afford your program. This is such a dangerous process of thinking. You help people more when you ask them to spend an amount of money that is appropriate value exchange for what you're doing, meaning that you need to earn that money in order to sustain yourself and to earn a profit. And they need to spend that money in order to take it seriously and to show up. Okay. Those who pay attention. All right. Those who pay, show up. And if you undercharge, you're going to attract people who aren't taking it seriously. The same person could take you more or less seriously depending on what you charge. The same person might not hire you at a lower rate because it doesn't feel trustworthy. I use this analogy. I've used it before in the podcast, of it's like breathing. Oxygen in, CO2 out. Okay. You can't just not take in oxygen and breathe out more. So you can't undercharge and still deliver at a high level. You can't do that. It'll balance out eventually. You'll burn out. You'll get resentful. Your clients will be annoying. Like, it won't work. So, if you're feeling resentful at all of your clients, and I'm just going to tell you 9.5 times out of 10, you need to raise your prices. With the people I work with, like, it's very rare. I can't even think of an example where we've had someone be like, oh yeah, you're charging too much. I don't think it's happened. So the question isn't, can people afford it? It's, are you selling it? And not everyone is going to afford you. And you have to decide, am I running a charity or a business? Those are two different things. And if you want to run a business, then we got to work on this money mindset stuff around running a business. Don't judge your clients about how much they can afford. It's super insulting and condescending. So we often will be like, well, I don't know if they can afford that. Like, we're being sweet, but actually it's super condescending. So it's like that woman going to the bank and people assuming that she doesn't know what she's doing and she can't have a loan and things like that. Like, oh, like maybe you could do this. Like, it's super condescending. It should be illegal, right? You do not make any your clients will tell you, hey, I don't have the money for this, but you do not make any judgments to people about what they can afford. In fact, I would urge you to just assume everyone can afford it. and just talk about it as such and let people tell you if they can't. Because the last thing you want to do is assume someone can't afford something and absolutely insult them by giving them a discount or a deal or something when they're proud to pay full price. And there's plenty of clients out there who are. So again, you need to also look at how am I showing up? Am I being that person who's haggling on prices and asking for discounts and asking for refunds all the time? Am I doing that? Because if you're doing that, that is what you're attracting, right? So I say like you need to show up like the client you want to attract. And that means when you make a commitment to a program, to a service provider, to whatever, you show up, you do the work. You don't ask for refunds. You don't do that. You take responsibility because that's what you're going to ask your clients to do as well. So it's really important on the energy exchange. Okay. On that note, we have just as many people tell us that Yay for 100K is too cheap as we do people tell us that they can't afford it and it's too expensive. So it's like, none of it matters. Don't listen to any of that. That's not how we do pricing. We don't do pricing based on what people telling us they can afford. That's never how we do pricing. I have a whole episode on that. And you know, inside of Yay for 100K, we coach you through that extensively. Pricing has nothing to do with us pulling our audience and what their budgets are. Never. Okay. There's a limit to how much money you're going to make just trying to work hard. Okay. So this is again, in Yay for 100K, this is really the basis of the whole program is we have to totally untangle you from this dollars per hour exchange. That's not how it works. It's about value, and value can be created without more hours or more effort or more work. You're putting a cap on how much you can make. We need to stop attaching morality to money. I've addressed that. And you can't serve and help if you're broke. You just can't do it. So I just think it's an obligation. I feel like it's an obligation I have to have a healthy, well-resourced, I guess, business that has cash to serve people. Because if I don't have that, and it's not about me having money, you've got to detach it from, oh, I need to have money so I'm super rich and can have a private jet. Like that's probably not going to motivate you for too long. Not many people are motivated for years to have a private jet. If you really want to serve folks, which is what most people in our audience do, so I'm assuming that, then don't make it about you. Make it about the business having a healthy cash flow so that you can serve people. Pay yourself a salary apart from that. And then don't attach your salary to the business making money, right? Like I make a certain amount of money from the business, no matter how much money the business is making. I don't attach my salary to it. Now, yes, I will pay myself out bonuses and things like that based on profit, but I make a very conservative, you might be shocked by how small salary from my business, to just support my living expenses, savings, investments, things like that. And that's it. And the rest is fueling the business. It's gas in the machine, right? It's oxygen for the blood. Okay. So like I said, I want to share with you a few resources of entrepreneurs who will challenge your money beliefs, who are experts at this money talk, whether it's money mindset, money management, what have you. The first one I already mentioned is Denise Duffield Thomas. She has an excellent book called Get Rich, Lucky Bitch. One of my favorite books of all time, probably the only book I've read 7 times. I've had it physical, Kindle, Audible, you name it. I've recommended it to almost everyone I know. I used to be one of her top affiliates for the program, and her bootcamp program, which I highly recommend as well. Get that book or don't get that book at your own peril. Honestly, you will regret it. Rachel Rodgers has her whole We Should All Be Millionaires. She has her club. I don't know the details of her club. I'm not in it yet. I would really like to join at some point here. It's on my list. She also has a book coming out called We Should All Be Millionaires. And I love this phrase, we should all be millionaires. I just love it. I think it's so great. So Rachel Rodgers is someone I would recommend for so many reasons. But yeah, go follow her on Instagram, pre-order her book. Right now, I ordered copies for me and all of my friends. Wanted to support her. Tiffany Alicia, the Budgetnista. She's very well known. She's kicking butt. She actually just had a book release, I think this week at the time of this recording, called Get Good with Money. I'm also about to order my copy of that. So that's a book I would really recommend. Again, these are all women I'm mentioning who are teaching the money game. All right. So I think this is going to be some good resources for us. The final one is not by a woman, but this one I just absolutely loved. I got this at the library on a whim and I did not regret it. It's called Talking to My Daughter About the Economy. I've mentioned it a few times on the podcast. I talk about it constantly in Yay for 100K. Yanis Varoufakis is the author. He was the Greek minister of finance. This guy is
legit. This book is so small. It's so digestible. It's so easy to read. It's fascinating. He really explains in a way that is not a bunch of like jargon that we can't understand as regular people on why money is literally limitless and how and the book is really about like how capitalism works and how it fails us in a lot of ways and its problems. But I really encourage you because I just think we all deserve to have a better understanding of the larger macro economy. And this is the thing that put the nail in the coffin on this whole concept for me that money is limited. It is not a pie. There is not a certain amount. That's not how it works. We've all been brainwashed to believe that, just like we've been brainwashed so many other things. And you want to make sure you're, not going down some rabbit hole with QAnon learning crazy stuff. You want to check your resources. So I hesitate saying things like, do your own research. But really like read stuff, use your own judgment, your own sort of filter, and make your own decisions. And, that's it. I just wanted to have a conversation with you. This was a bit longer than I thought it was going to be about money mindset, just some concepts I would love for you to consider. I would love to know your thoughts on this episode. Next week, we're going to be talking about time management. So we're talking about money, time, these big concepts this month. And I will chat with you all then. All right. Bye-bye. Yay. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you love today's content and are ready to finally start making a full-time income from your business this year, make sure to get on the wait list for my program, Yay for Clients, over at yayforclients.com, and you'll be notified the next time enrollment is open. Or if you're already booked with clients and you want to learn how you can turn your signature service into a signature program and add 100K of revenue to your bottom line, come apply to my group coaching program, Yay for 100K, over at CourtneyShaw.com/apply. Thanks again and have an awesome day.